Boredom is often misunderstood. It is labeled as laziness, distraction, or a problem to be solved. Yet beneath its quiet surface, boredom is speaking, softly, persistently. It arrives in moments when stimulation fades and attention drifts, not as an enemy, but as a signal, a pause between meanings. A space where the mind, unoccupied, begins to reveal what it has been avoiding or what it longs for. In a world engineered to eliminate boredom at all costs, its presence feels uncomfortable, even threatening. But boredom is not emptiness, it is information. It carries messages about misalignment, fatigue, curiosity, and unmet inner needs. To feel bored is not to lack something external, but to encounter something internal. This is the silent language boredom speaks, and few have learned how to listen. Boredom rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives quietly, often unnoticed at first. A slight heaviness in the chest, a restless shifting of attention. A sense that time is moving, but nothing is moving with you. The mind reaches outward, searching for something to attach to, and finds nothing that holds. In these moments, boredom feels like suspension, not quite emptiness, not quite discomfort, more like being uninsured. Thoughts wander without direction. Tasks lose their weight. Even pleasure feels distant, as if dulled by an invisible layer. This is where boredom begins, not in the absence of things to do, but in the absence of meaning that feels accessible. The world is still full, but nothing is pulling at you. Nothing is asking for your presence. Psychologically, boredom is an awareness of disconnection. Attention has nowhere to settle. The mind, designed to orient toward engagement, scans its environment and comes up empty. This scanning creates unease. Not dramatic distress, but a low-grade agitation that is hard to name. People often describe boredom as nothingness, but internally, it is active. The brain is working, seeking stimulation, seeking relevance, seeking resonance. When it fails to find these, boredom emerges as a signal. Something here is not meeting you. This signal is frequently misunderstood. Because boredom feels uncomfortable, it is treated as something to escape. Phones are reached for. Noise is added. Movement is forced. The discomfort is muted, but the signal remains untranslated. At the emotional level, boredom can feel strangely personal, as if it says something about who you are. Why can't I be content? Why does nothing interest me right now? These questions quietly turn boredom into self-judgment. But boredom is not a flaw of character. It is a state of attention. It often appears when external structure collapses, when expectations pause, when stimulation drops below a certain threshold. In these moments, the inner world becomes more audible, and not everything the inner world has to say is immediately pleasant. For some, boredom brings anxiety. For others, sadness. For others still, a vague irritability with no clear target. These emotions are not caused by boredom, but revealed by it. Boredom lowers the volume of distraction, allowing underlying states to surface. This is why boredom can feel heavy. It is unbuffered. In modern life, boredom is increasingly rare and increasingly intolerable. Constant stimulation has trained attention to expect immediate engagement. When that engagement is missing, the nervous system reacts as if something is wrong. But nothing is wrong. Something is quiet. In that quiet, the mind loses its usual scaffolding. Identity, often reinforced by doing, producing, or responding, temporarily dissolves. Without a role to play, the self feels less defined. This can feel unsettling. Boredom exposes how much of identity is built around activity, around usefulness, around momentum. When these are removed even briefly, the question arises, who am I when nothing is required of me? This question is rarely welcomed. So boredom is quickly covered over. But in its raw form, boredom is a threshold state, a pause where the mind is no longer occupied, but not yet redirected. It is a moment where nothing holds you because nothing is supposed to. This does not mean boredom is pleasant. It is not meant to be. Its discomfort is part of its language, a gentle insistence that attention has drifted away from something essential. Before boredom becomes frustration or numbness, it is simply awareness. Awareness that the current state, external or internal, is not aligned. In this first stage, boredom is neutral, observant, waiting. It is not asking to be fixed, it is asking to be noticed. And if allowed to remain, even briefly, it begins to reveal what comes next. Boredom is not only a feeling that appears in the present, it is a response shaped over time, learned quietly through patterns of attention, reward, and expectation formed early in life. Long before boredom had a name, it had a context. In childhood, boredom is often one of the first internal states that is discouraged. A child says, "There's nothing to do," and the world responds quickly, with toys, screens, suggestions, structure. Discomfort is met with stimulation. Stillness is treated as a problem to solve. In these moments, a subtle lesson is taught: boredom is something to escape. For some children, unstructured time was rare. Days were filled with schedules, supervision, and direction. Attention was always guided outward. The capacity to sit with internal states was never fully practiced. Boredom, when it appeared, felt unfamiliar and unsettling. For others, boredom was associated with emotional absence, long hours without engagement, caregivers distracted or unavailable. In these environments, boredom carried loneliness. it became entangled with the feeling of not being met, not seen, not responded to. This emotional pairing matters, because boredom does not exist in isolation. It absorbs the emotional climate it first appears in. If boredom was accompanied by neglect, it later evokes sadness or anxiety. If it was accompanied by pressure to be productive, it later evokes guilt. School environments reinforced these patterns. Attention was rewarded when it was focused, goal-directed, and compliant. Daydreaming was corrected. Stillness without purpose was labeled disengagement. Boredom became a sign of failure either of the student or the system. Over time, boredom was moralized. It came to mean wasting time, lacking ambition, not trying hard enough. The natural ebb of attention was reframed as a personal shortcoming. Then came modern stimulation. Digital environments shortened the distance between boredom and relief. Discomfort could be erased instantly. A screen, a notification. The brain learned a new rhythm. Boredom appears, stimulation follows. Quickly, reliably. This conditioning reshaped attention. The tolerance for cognitive underload decreased. Moments of waiting, once neutral, became intolerable. Silence felt louder. Stillness felt heavier. As adults, boredom now arrives layered. It carries childhood lessons, emotional associations, and conditioned expectations. It no longer feels like a simple pause. It feels charged. This is why boredom can feel disproportionately uncomfortable. It is not only about the present moment lacking stimulation. It is about old narratives resurfacing. I should be doing something. Something is wrong. I'm falling behind. For some, boredom triggers urgency, a compulsion to fill time, to be useful, to stay ahead of discomfort. For others, it triggers collapse, a heavy inertia, a sense of futility. Both reactions are learned. Importantly, boredom was rarely modeled as something to inhabit. Adults did not often demonstrate how to sit with it calmly. Instead, they avoided it, managed it, or dismissed it, so boredom remained unfamiliar territory. Culturally, boredom became a threat, a sign of inefficiency, of wasted potential. Entire industries formed around its elimination, but boredom persisted. Because boredom is not a flaw in the system, it is a feature of the human mind. Attention fluctuates, meaning fades and returns. No level of stimulation can erase this rhythm. What changes is how boredom is interpreted. For many, boredom feels like a regression, a return to helplessness, to waiting without assurance, to stillness without instruction. Understanding how boredom was learned reveals why it feels the way it does now, why it carries emotion beyond its surface, why it feels heavier than it should. Boredom is not new, but the way it is experienced has been shaped, and beneath that shaping lies the original state, neutral, informative, and quietly patient, waiting to be relearned. Boredom is not a vague mood drifting through the mind. It is a specific psychological state with a clear function. The brain creates boredom deliberately, not to punish, but to signal a breakdown between attention and meaning. At its core, boredom arises from cognitive underload. Attention is active, alert, and ready, but there is nothing sufficiently engaging to attach to. The mind is awake yet unstimulated. This mismatch creates tension. Neuroscientifically, boredom is tied to the brain's reward system. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the chemical of pleasure. More accurately, it is the chemical of anticipation. It motivates seeking. When the brain expects engagement and fails to find it, dopamine activity drops. The result is restlessness rather than satisfaction. This is why boredom does not feel calm. It feels agitated. The body senses that something should be happening. At the same time, the default mode network of the brain becomes more active. This network governs self-referential thinking, memory, and imagination. When external tasks fall away, the mind turns inward. Thoughts about the self, the past, and the future surface more easily. If the inner world is unresolved, boredom can quickly become uncomfortable. Old worries emerge. Suppressed emotions float upward. The mind fills the gap left by stimulation with whatever has been waiting underneath. This is why boredom is often confused with sadness or anxiety. It is not causing these emotions, it is removing the distractions that kept them quiet. Attention regulation plays a key role. Some people can shift attention fluidly, finding interest even in low stimulation environments. Others rely more heavily on external input to maintain engagement. This is not a flaw. It reflects differences in neural sensitivity and conditioning. Modern environments strain this system. Constant novelty trains attention to expect rapid reward. When that reward is absent, the nervous system interprets it as deprivation. The brain reacts not to danger, but to deprivation of stimulation. Boredom, then, is the brain's protest, a signal that its current environment is insufficient for engagement. But there is another layer. Boredom is also tied to meaning-making. Research shows that boredom increases when activities feel purposeless, even if they are stimulating. One can be busy and bored at the same time. This is existential boredom, not of the senses, but of significance. In these moments, the brain is not asking for entertainment, it is asking for relevance. This is why distraction only works temporarily. It feeds stimulation but not meaning. The relief fades quickly and boredom returns, often stronger. Psychologically, boredom sits at the intersection of agency and restraint. It arises when the desire to engage meets an inability to do so freely. Waiting rooms, obligations, repetitive tasks, social situations where expression is limited. The self is present but constrained. This sense of constraint activates frustration. The mind wants movement, but the situation restricts it. Boredom becomes the emotional marker of that tension. Importantly, boredom is not a deficit of imagination. It is often a surplus of unused mental energy. The mind is capable of more than the moment allows. Children experience this clearly. When bored, they often oscillate between restlessness and creativity. If not immediately distracted, boredom can tip into invention. But if boredom is always relieved externally, this transition never occurs. Adults retain the same capacity, but with more resistance. Responsibility, habit, and expectation block the pathway from boredom to curiosity. Emotionally, boredom challenges identity. When nothing engages attention, the self feels undefined. Productivity pauses. Purpose blurs. This can feel threatening in a culture that ties worth to output. So boredom becomes something to avoid, not because it is painful, but because it destabilizes self-concept. Yet boredom is temporary by design. The brain does not intend for it to last. It is a transitional state, a prompt to redirect attention towards something more aligned. The problem arises when boredom is misunderstood. When it is treated as emptiness instead of information. When it is silenced rather than translated. Psychology does not frame boredom as a failure of motivation. It frames it as feedback. Feedback that says attention is awake, but meaning is missing. Feedback that says stimulation is present, but relevance is not. Feedback that says something wants to change. Boredom is not the absence of life. It is life signaling misalignment. And once understood, its discomfort begins to make sense not as a flaw, but as a message waiting to be interpreted. Boredom is rarely allowed to remain untouched. Almost instinctively, it is met with resistance. A reach for stimulation. A movement away from stillness. The discomfort it brings is subtle, but persuasive. Stillness exposes too much. When boredom settles in, the external world quiets. And in that quiet, the inner world becomes louder. Thoughts that were muted by activity begin to surface. Feelings without immediate outlets make themselves known. The mind, unoccupied, turns inward, and not everything it finds there feels welcome. This is why boredom often triggers avoidance rather than reflection. Distraction becomes a reflex. The hand moves before the thought is finished. A screen lights up, noise fills the space. The moment passes unresolved. The relief is immediate, but incomplete. Psychologically, this resistance is protective. The nervous system senses vulnerability. Stillness removes the buffers that regulate emotional exposure. Without tasks or stimulation, emotions surface without mediation. For some, boredom reveals anxiety. For others, loneliness. For others, a quiet dissatisfaction that has no clear source. These emotions feel heavier because they arrive without context. Rather than interpreting boredom as a signal, it is treated as a threat. This creates a cycle. Boredom appears. Distraction is used. The underlying state remains. Over time, the tolerance for stillness decreases. The moment boredom arises, discomfort follows faster and stronger. The mind learns stillness is unsafe. Culturally, this resistance is reinforced. Productivity is praised. Pauses are justified only if they serve recovery. Idleness is suspect. To be unoccupied is to risk judgment, both external and internal. So boredom becomes something to hide, something to fix, something to outpace. Yet beneath this resistance lies a deeper fear, the fear of confronting unmet needs. Boredom often points toward areas of life that feel stagnant, misaligned, or unexpressed. Letting it linger might require acknowledgement. Acknowledgement requires honesty. And honesty can be destabilizing. It is easier to scroll than to sit with the question boredom brings, what am I avoiding? There is also fear of meaninglessness. In stillness, the narratives that give structure to life temporarily dissolve. Goals feel distant. Identity loosens. Without constant reinforcement, the self feels less defined. This can provoke existential discomfort, a sense of floating without anchor. Boredom is blamed, but the discomfort belongs to the absence of structure, not to boredom itself. Resistance, then, is not about boredom being unpleasant. It is about what boredom makes visible. Interestingly, the more one resists boredom, the less satisfying stimulation becomes. Pleasure becomes thin. Engagement feels forced. Attention fractures. The mind jumps quickly, rarely settling. This creates a paradox. The effort to escape boredom increases it. Because boredom is not asking for more input. It is asking for a different quality of engagement. Stillness offers that possibility, but only if allowed. When boredom is met without resistance, its texture changes, it softens. The agitation settles. What remains is not emptiness, but space. But space requires trust. Trust that nothing catastrophic will happen if nothing happens for a moment. Trust that identity will not dissolve. Trust that feeling something uncomfortable is survivable. Most people are not taught this trust, so resistance continues. Quietly, habitually, automatically. Yet boredom persists not as an enemy, but as a persistent signal. returning again and again, not to punish, but to be heard. The resistance to stillness is understandable. It is learned, it is reinforced, it is protective. But it is not inevitable, and beneath it lies a state of awareness that boredom has been guarding all along, waiting patiently for the moment resistance loosens. When boredom is no longer resisted, something subtle begins to shift. The agitation loses its edge. The need to escape softens. What remains is a quieter state, one that carries information. Boredom, when listened to, is communicative. It does not speak in clear sentences. It speaks through absence, through the feeling that something essential is missing, not externally but internally. When stimulation fades and boredom remains, it begins to point inward. Often, it points to unmet needs. Needs for rest that have been postponed too long. Needs for autonomy that have been compromised by obligation. Needs for expression that have been delayed in the name of stability. Boredom emerges when these needs go unacknowledged, quietly insisting on attention. In this sense, boredom is diagnostic. It highlights misalignment between how life is being lived and what the inner world is asking for. For some, boredom reveals emotional exhaustion, a fatigue not cured by sleep because it originates from emotional overextension. Too much output, too little replenishment. When activity stops, the exhaustion surfaces. For others, boredom exposes creative stagnation, a sense that imagination has been underused, that curiosity has been constrained. The mind feels capable but underutilized. Boredom becomes the signal of unused potential. There is also relational boredom, a feeling that connections have become repetitive or performative. Conversations circle familiar ground. Roles are fixed. Nothing new is allowed to emerge. In these moments, boredom is not about people, but about patterns. Existential boredom carries yet another message. It appears when activities are abundant but meaning is scarce. When life is full, but something feels hollow. This boredom is heavier, slower. It is not relieved by novelty. It asks deeper questions. What matters right now? What feels alive? What has been silenced? These questions do not demand immediate answers. They arise naturally when boredom is allowed to speak. Importantly, boredom does not prescribe solutions. It does not say do this. It says notice this. Its role is to draw attention, not to direct behavior. This is why boredom feels unresolved. It is not a state to complete, it is a state to pass through. Emotionally, boredom can also signal grief. The quiet grief of unrealized paths, of versions of the self that were postponed. When movement slows, these losses surface, not dramatically, but as a dull ache. Boredom gives them space. There is also desire beneath boredom, desire that has been muted by routine or obligation. Desire not necessarily for something new, but for something truer. When boredom appears, it often marks the distance between current reality and inner longing. This longing is often vague. It resists naming, and so boredom becomes its placeholder. People often fear this stage because it feels unproductive, but psychologically, it reorganizes attention. It loosens outdated structures. It creates room for recalibration. Boredom is the mind's way of saying this configuration no longer fits. Not because it is wrong, but because it has been outgrown. When boredom is rushed away, this message is missed. The same patterns repeat. The same dissatisfaction returns. Boredom becomes chronic. But when boredom is allowed to remain, even briefly, it clarifies. The fog lifts just enough to reveal direction, not as instruction, but as awareness. This awareness may feel uncomfortable. It may challenge assumptions. It may disrupt momentum. But it also restores honesty. Boredom strips life of distraction and leaves behind the question of alignment. And in that question lies its purpose. Boredom is not meaningless. It is meaning waiting to be reclaimed. It speaks softly because it trusts attention to lean in. And when it is finally heard, it does not need to stay. When boredom is no longer treated as a problem, its role changes. The agitation that once demanded escape begins to soften into openness. Attention no longer pulled outward settles inward. This is where boredom transforms from discomfort into space. Letting boredom speak does not require effort. It requires allowance. In this space, the mind slows its constant scanning. The nervous system recalibrates. Without the pressure to fill time, awareness becomes more receptive. Thoughts drift, but they are not chased. Feelings arise, but they are not immediately categorized. This state is often mistaken for doing nothing, but psychologically it is active reorganization. The brain uses boredom as an opportunity to reassess priorities. Networks that were overloaded begin to rest. Others, linked to creativity, imagination, and long-term planning, quietly activate. This is why insight often arrives in moments of apparent idleness. Creativity does not emerge from constant stimulation. It emerges from the space between stimuli. Boredom provides that space. When boredom is allowed, imagination returns to a natural rhythm. Not forced, not performative, just curious. Ideas appear without pressure to be useful. They hover. Some dissolve, some linger. Emotionally, this stage brings gentleness. Without distraction, feelings are felt in smaller doses. The nervous system processes them gradually. Nothing needs to be resolved immediately. This pacing restores trust. There is also a subtle restoration of agency. Instead of reacting to stimulation, attention chooses where to land. This choice may be quiet, but it is meaningful. It signals a return of self-directed engagement. Over time, boredom teaches patience, not as discipline, but as tolerance. The tolerance to remain present without immediate reward. This capacity strengthens emotional resilience. Importantly, letting boredom speak does not mean indulging rumination. It means allowing awareness without amplification. There is a difference between listening and spiraling. Listening is receptive. Spiraling is forceful. In this space, not as demands, but as preferences, curiosities surface. Interests reappear. The mind remembers what it is drawn to when not overwhelmed. This is often when people rediscover simple engagement, reading without urgency, walking without destination, creating without outcome. These acts feel different after boredom, lighter, less pressured. Boredom also softens the grip of comparison. Without constant external reference, attention returns to internal rhythm. Life feels less measured, more lived. There is a quiet recalibration of time. Minutes stretch, moments breathe. The nervous system exits urgency mode. Presence deepens. Letting boredom speak does not erase it, it completes it. The message is received. The state transitions. Eventually, boredom dissolves, not because it was avoided, but because it fulfilled its function. What replaces it is not constant excitement, it is steadiness, a subtle sense of alignment, engagement that feels chosen rather than imposed. This integration does not happen all at once. It unfolds gradually, through repeated moments of allowance. Each time boredom is met without resistance, its grip loosens. Over time, boredom loses its threat. It becomes familiar, informative, even welcome. Not because it is pleasant, but because it is honest. And in that honesty, attention finds its way back to what matters, not through urgency, but through quiet recognition. Boredom is often mistaken for a void, a hollow space where nothing happens. But when listened to long enough, boredom reveals itself as a threshold, a quiet passage between what has lost meaning and what has not yet appeared. In this stillness, there is a subtle intelligence at work. It does not rush, it does not persuade. It waits. Boredom clears the noise just enough for something truer to be felt. Not loudly, not urgently, but with a quiet certainty, a sense of knowing that arrives without explanation. This knowing is not a solution, it is an orientation. It points away from excess and toward alignment, away from constant stimulation and toward presence, away from borrowed urgency and toward internal rhythm. The stillness boredom creates is not empty. It is spacious. It allows the mind to rest from wanting. It allows the self to exist without performing. In this space, identity softens. The need to be interesting dissolves. What remains is a simple awareness of being unoccupied, unmeasured, intact. Boredom teaches that not all silence is absence. Some silence is listening. Some pauses are preparing something unseen. When boredom is no longer feared, it becomes a companion rather than an interruption. It arrives, delivers its message, and leaves quietly. Life does not become perpetually engaging. That was never the promise. What changes is the relationship to disengagement. It is no longer interpreted as failure. Moments of boredom become markers, signals that attention is ready for redirection. That meaning is ready to be renewed. The stillness boredom offers is not an escape from life. It is a return to it unfiltered by noise. And in that return, something subtle settles in. A calm that does not need stimulation. A presence that does not need proof. A knowing that does not need words. This is the silent language of boredom. Not asking to be eliminated, only asking to be understood.